I work alone in an old cinema. Last night, a movie played that erased my town. The last real sound I ever heard was the click-clack of a film projector running in an empty room. It was the summer of '83. I was managing the Orpheum, a tired 3-screen cinema at the edge of a Colorado town that God had long since forgotten. The place smelled like buttered salt and wet basement. It was supposed to be a temporary gig, something to pay the mortgage until the school district found the money to hire a history teacher again. Most nights, it was just me and the ghosts of 1,000 forgotten movies. That night, a Thursday, I was sweeping up the popcorn battlefield in Theater 2 when the sound started. Click-clack, click-clack, a slow, steady rhythm from the projection booth upstairs. My blood went cold. I was the only one here. I'd locked the doors an hour ago. I crept up the narrow stairs, my footsteps swallowed by the musty carpet. The door to the booth was ajar. Inside, the projector whirred, its single bright eye casting a beam of dancing dust motes into the dark. On the feed reel was a canister I'd never seen before. Plain, battered silver. No label, no studio mark, nothing. It just was. Down below, the house lights faded to black. I didn't have a choice, did I? I walked back down to the seats, drawn by some stupid, primal curiosity. On the screen, a storm boiled in a monochrome sky. No sound, just the angry movement of clouds. Then, out of the chaos, 4 shapes took form. Riders on horseback, their bodies indistinct, like they were woven from shadow and lightning. They galloped straight toward the camera, growing larger, more defined, until they filled the entire screen. One rode a horse the color of bone, its hide stretched so tight you could see the skeleton beneath. Its rider carried a crown, but his face was a void. He raised a hand, not in greeting, but in command. And as he did, I felt a strange tingling in my own hand. I looked down. The armrest beneath my fingers was decaying, the red velvet turning to gray dust, the wood underneath splintering, aging 100 years in a second. I looked at the screen, then back at the theater around me. A dark, creeping rot was spreading from the screen outwards, like a disease. The carpet withered, sprouting thin, pale weeds. The ornate gold leaf on the walls peeled and tarnished, flaking to the floor. The rider on the bone-white horse leaned forward, his empty face seeming to stare right into me. His laugh wasn't a sound you could hear. It was a pressure in your ears, a high-frequency whine like a television about to blow. I scrambled backwards, falling over a seat that crumbled under my weight and hit the floor. It was wet, sticky. The whole place now smelled of grave dirt and stagnant water. The rider's hand came down. The screen went white. Then nothing. I woke up coughing, the air thick with dust. My flashlight beam cut a weak yellow path through the gloom. The projector was silent. The theater was just a dark, empty room. But it was wrong. I ran for the exit, shoved the doors open, and stumbled into the lobby. It was a husk. The candy counter was a heap of rotted splinters and shattered glass. The film posters were peeling skeletons of paper, the faces of movie stars eaten away by mildew. The building hadn't just aged, it had died. I burst outside into the night. The parking lot was a graveyard. My beat-up Ford sat under a blanket of gray dust, its tires flat and cracked. Weeds choked the asphalt. It looked like nobody had driven here in half a century. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew I had to get home. To Annalise. The car groaned and sputtered, but it started. I drove through empty streets, my headlights cutting through a town that was, impossibly, still alive. I found our house just as I'd left it. Lights on. Annalise was on the couch, flipping through a magazine. "Jesus, Reese," she said, looking up. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Long night," I managed, my voice a dry rasp. How could I explain? "Honey, the theater rotted around me while I watched a cursed movie. I sounded insane even in my own head. I just held her for a long time, breathing in the normal, clean scent of her hair. The next morning, I woke up alone. Annalise had already left for her shift at the hospital. The television was on in the living room, murmuring about troop movements on the Soviet border. Standard Cold War bullshit. I was frying eggs when the news anchor's voice began to warp, stretching like old cassette tape. The screen filled with static. Through the hiss, a new voice came through. It was metallic, synthesized, but it knew my name. "We have a place for you, Reese." I clicked the TV off so hard the knob came off in my hand. I spent the day at the theater trying to pretend. I sold tickets to teenagers, scooped popcorn, fixed a jam in the projector for E.T. I checked the security tapes from the night before. There was nothing, just me, sweeping an empty theater, then leaving. The projector never turned on. The silver canister didn't exist. I was losing my fucking mind. That night, something woke me. A smell, acrid, like burnt wires and cooked meat. The house was dead quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I got out of bed, Annalise breathing softly beside me, and followed the smell to the living room. There, on the wall above the television, was a scorch mark. It was a perfect, life-sized silhouette of a man holding a bow. And right where his heart should have been, there was a black, splintered hole burnt through the drywall. My breath hitched. I backed away slowly, went back to the bedroom and lay there, wide awake, until the sun came up. I didn't go to work. I drove to the high school. It was empty for the summer, a hollow shell of a place. I went to my old classroom, 213, history. My sanctuary. I didn't know what I was looking for. An answer, a reason. I pulled a dusty world mythology textbook from the shelf. It fell open to a chapter near the back. A faded color plate showed a dark, dramatic painting. The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Conquest on a white horse. War on a red. Famine on a black. Death on a pale one. They ride as a warning, the text said, harbingers of mankind's own self-destruction. I recognized the rider with the crown, the one from the film. A flicker of movement in the corner of the room. A small black and white security monitor I'd never noticed before sputtered to life. The screen showed a live feed of the hallway just outside my classroom door. The image was grainy, washed out in a sickly green night vision glow. Something was moving down the hall. It was gaunt, skeletal, dragging a pair of rusted scales. It moved with a twitching, unnatural gait. And all around it, the air seemed to shimmer, thick and dark. A low humming sound started to fill the classroom. Not from the monitor. It was coming from the hallway, from right outside the door. The sound of a million flies. I didn't use the door. I threw a chair through the window, scrambled over the broken glass, and dropped to the lawn below, not caring about the cuts. I just ran. I sprinted across the empty football field to the faculty parking lot, the hum of insects chasing me the whole way. I fumbled with my keys, threw myself into the car, and peeled out of the lot. In my rearview mirror, I saw him, the skeletal figure, standing at the edge of the school grounds, just watching. And he wasn't alone. On the low ridge behind him, two other riders materialized from the afternoon heat haze, one on a white horse, one on a red. The sky was turning a strange bruised purple. I floored it, the engine screaming in protest. The needle climbed past 80. I had to get home. I had to get Annalise. Then I saw him, blocking the road ahead. A massive figure in blood-red armor, sitting astride a horse that looked like it was made of fire and embers. In his hand, he held a sword that burned with a white-hot intensity, warping the very air around it. War. He raised the sword. I swerved, yanking the wheel hard. The car spun out, tires screaming on hot asphalt before catching the gravel shoulder. The world became a violent, tumbling chaos of metal and glass and pain. There was a final, deafening crunch, then silence. My ears rang. The world was sideways. I could taste blood, hot and coppery in my mouth. Through the shattered spider web of the windshield, I saw them approaching. The four of them, walking their horses slowly, their shapes dark against the sick sky. War dismounted and knelt beside my broken window. He didn't smile, he didn't need to. The firelight from his armor illuminated his face, all sharp angles and cruel satisfaction. He just looked at me, and I knew. Then, behind him, the sky went white, not like a flash, a pure, silent, all-consuming whiteness that erased the world. My last thought wasn't about the end of everything. It was just a name. Annalise? I woke up cold. So cold. My body was a symphony of agony. I was still buckled into the driver's seat of my car, which was now a rusted-out shell in a ditch. The sun was a dull red smear in a permanent brown twilight. How long was I out? A day? A week? I stumbled out of the car. The world was silent. No birds, no wind. Just a fine gray ash that coated everything. The town was gone. Skeletons of buildings clawed at the filthy sky. The streets were cracked and melted. I walked for what felt like hours, my own footsteps, the only sound in a dead world. Our house was still standing. Barely. The roof was caved in, the windows blown out. Inside, everything was covered in that same gray ash. On the living room floor, I found the shattered pieces of Annalise's favorite coffee mug. I sank onto what was left of the couch and finally broke. I cried until my throat was raw and my body shook with empty, silent sobs. When I finally looked up, I saw it. The television, its screen cracked but otherwise intact. And, lying next to it, the mythology book from my classroom, blown open by some long dead wind. My finger, trembling, traced the words on the page. They appear as a warning before great destruction, before humanity's own undoing. A warning. It was all just a fucking warning. And then I heard it. A new sound in the suffocating silence. Thump, 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 slow. Heavy, rhythmic. The sound of a single horse walking down what used to be my street. It was coming. The last one. The one on the pale horse. Coming to collect the one soul he'd missed.